Good evening, everyone, and welcome to round 4 of the PSGL F3 Championship at the Circuit de Gilles Villeneuve in Canada. We are back. It's Monday. It's 7 p.m. It's 8 p.m. UK time. Sorry, been used to that time last season, and I'm very happy to be joined by Jake for the first time for a full race this season. Good evening.
Yeah, it's nice to not just be popping in. It's nice to be here from the get-go. It's only taken until round four, but I'm here, and yeah, it's such a great track to do my first full commentary on. Obviously, Canada didn't have the World Cup they were hoping for, but they were certainly very entertaining, and I suspect this will be a similar vein to that.
I really hope so. Has always been a track that I personally enjoy, and it tends to be a track where we see some solid racing in real life, and especially on the F1 game. I think overtaking should very much be possible, even though it is not as easy as you would expect seeing those long straights, because usually the corners are very tight, especially the last chicane is definitely not an easy pass for you, especially if you go side by side into there. It's usually ending in tears with the wall of champions on the right hand side. And turn one, not an easy spot for overtaking either, leading into a right hander of turn two, which tightens up a little bit, and that usually makes the racing very intense, very close, and usually results in some crashes here and there.
Yeah, it's Canada's just got such a great history in F1. This track feels like it's been around forever, and we've seen so many classic races around it. It's a strange layout. 14 turns, mostly made up of fast chicanes. The walls are always very close. It feels like a street track in that regard. You'd think with these wider cars that it actually wouldn't be that easy to overtake on, but I don't know. For whatever reason, there seems to be plenty of overtakes and plenty of action either way. But we've got the first few drivers starting their laps now, and early stages of his championship, but it's heating up pretty nicely, I would say, at the front of the field.
Yeah, we saw very close racing in the last couple of rounds, and in Zandvoort, we obviously had rain towards the second half of the race, which spiced things up quite a lot, where strategy then came in as a very big factor, which pretty much turned all the race on its head, with some drivers making some strategical errors. One of them was sadly Kryptonite, who was running really well, then made a mistake on the first stint, and then kind of had to fight back, as we've got the first lap time set by Male, and usually Kryptonite goes and beats that, and yes he does, by not much though, only a bit more than half a tenth. But Kryptonite has been one of the drivers who has been really strong in qualifying, but in the race he tends to have a little mistake here and there, as Alberto sets a new fastest lap of the session so far. And if he wants to compete in that championship fight, he definitely needs to keep those mistakes to a minimum from now on, because that really hindered his chances of good results in Brazil and also in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's consistency is going to really be key here, and shout out to Rick last week who maintained his championship lead despite really being pretty anonymous for most of the race. You have to say, until the rain fell, he was kind of in no man's land, but he fought back to get a third consecutive podium, and he is the man to beat. Although, based on last week, his qualifying performances could still do with some work as Max goes P2, and we're already seeing just how close this grid's going to be. Just a few temps covering the first few cars. There isn't really that much time you can win or lose around this track. There's very few corners, and I suspect we're going to see a lot of invalidations of qualifying laps, particularly at the end of qualifying when drivers are perhaps looking for time that isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, with all those chicanes, it's obviously very close to the limit all the time, and with there being a lot of runoff rather than gravel, which would definitely prevent you even more from running wide. It's very easy to invalidate, and especially in the last chicane, it is very frustrating. If you've got your lap set up perfectly, you've done everything right, it can all go wrong in that final chicane, as we see it here from Jabaka actually. As we speak about it, kind of the commentator's curse here back again. I just need to quickly check the party volume, that I just turned the sound up a little bit more, that you can hear the cars as well. Yeah, now it should be fine. All right. Sorry.
No problems at all. It's best to do it now rather than in the race as well. So, yeah, it's early stages. Currently, Alberto Bessett's the quickest lap time, which I've got to be honest, based on the standings, is not someone you would predict. I definitely think he's got a lot of pace, but consistency has proven to be his downfall from time to time. I believe we commentated on him a few times last season. I could be completely making that up. I've done so many seasons now. You get them all. They all kind of jumble together in your head. But I do recognise his name, so I know that we've seen him in previous seasons at some point. I'm just looking at Damiano, who's about to finish his lap in the AlphaTauri. It looks like a good lap, although it has only gone 7th after I built it up a little bit. But you know, none of the sort of standout drivers in the early rounds, you would say at the moment, are all that high up the timing sheets. So this could end up with a mixed up grid, or are we going to see the cream rise to the front by the end of the session?
Yeah, Ethan has invalidated another lap here for the speaker with who caught our attention last race with, I think, some battles he had. I can't remember who was it with. I'm not too sure right now. Who was it with? Do you remember? I remember him battling and then actually catching up to the front pack. I think it was Ghost King.
Ah, yes.
I think it was
they
Ghost
were
King.
just off the front group of cars.
Yeah, and he caught up very nicely towards the end of the race. So it looked like the wet conditions probably suited him quite a lot. And that was exactly what I mentioned. That last chicane is very tricky to nail because you can't take it too carefully. Otherwise, you're going to lose a whole lot of time. And all that hard work that you've done in the previous sectors is completely gone. But as well, if you're over the limit, it just destroys your lap time in the form of an invalidation, as Kryptonite was really close to the outside wall here. At the end of the second sector, goes purple in the middle sector though, and it looks to be a very good lap time if you can keep it together. But there's that famous final chicane coming up, and I think I would be very surprised if we wouldn't see a car at least clipping that outside wall of champions.
Oh, and Kryptonite got it all wrong. And that is that's the latest bail to the pit lane I've ever seen. Made that one work, but yeah, just carried too much speed into the first part of a chicane, and that's what you say. You've got to commit, but it's such a fine line between getting it right and getting it wrong. About final chicane, that we are going to see drivers lose their laps right at the end. One driver who's currently on a personal best is Firefox in the Red Bull in P8. He's nearly 2 tenths up, so if he can carry that going, could put himself on the first couple of rows. But like I said, this final chicane can make or break you, but that looked pretty smooth from the Red Bull driver up to the line. Was P8 before, he now goes second, makes it an all Red Bull front row, which is quite a turn up for the books when you look at the standings and see they are on 0 points after 3 rounds.
I think it could very much turn throughout this quality session for many, many times, just because of all the invalidations and because it's such a short track. As we see, you called him Anryu, I called him Anru before. What do we call him now? Let's make it at least equal.
I'll say Anryu just because there's the 2 E's. I feel like I don't know, but I mean, this is where we're both wrong.
Yeah, we'll just go with whatever we want to say. Apologies to you, but I hope that's kind of right at least. Yeah, but also because it's such a short lap time, you'll be able to probably go for maybe even 4 laps, but you would need a soft tire to go for 2 runs. But obviously that works if you invalidate one of your laps. You can easily just stay out one more lap and go for another one on that same set, just because that lap time is so short. And I think I feel like shorter racetracks tend to deliver more exciting quali sessions, as Jabaka improves massively, but he's also 6 seconds off the pace right now with not a proper lap set so far.
Yeah, I get what you mean about the shorter laps, because you tend to see, you don't tend to get, sometimes with the longer laps you get the huge lulls in the middle of the session. Your driver's only going for one fine lap and then pitting. With these short tracks, it promotes drivers to stay out on track more often, as Jabraka does quite a substantial improvement to go on to provisional pole position. But that might not last all too long, because I'm on board with Black Box, who's already had a good start to the season in his McLaren, and he's done a purple middle sector, and he's looking very strong indeed. So we'll see what he can do as he comes up towards the final chicane. So far, we haven't seen anyone in the World Champions, but I'd be shocked if that doesn't change. I wouldn't say that was the most optimum run from Black Box there. No, he lost about 4 tenths in that final corner. Yeah, I think he put too much speed into the first part and couldn't maintain it through the corner. So only improves to 10th, but the pace is there. It showed that if he can just hook the whole lap up.
Yeah, that's the big difference. You know, knowing the pace is there and then actually putting that lap time in, that's a whole nother story. And I feel like that's what I mean, around shorter circuits as well, I feel like you tend to go for more risks just because you know that it won't take you long to go around for another lap. But around longer tracks like Spa or Singapore or something, I feel like the drivers are a bit... Obviously, it's qualifying and you try to go as close to the limit as you can, but you'd maybe not go for that 1,000th of a second if it's a long track, just because you know you won't have the time to make another lap if you invalidate that. And around short circuits, I feel like the drivers are happy to risk a bit more, just because they know they have the time to then redo another lap and then be more careful on that one. But if you can't put a lap in until right at the end, you really have to go for a careful lap in order to at least be somewhere in the midfield instead of right at the back of the grid. But it obviously lowers your chance of getting that perfect lap together to, in the end, take pole position, which at the moment is and then Ghost King invalidates. It is only taken by 6,000ths of a second because Kryptonite improved, which I missed sadly. But yeah, top 5 all within 1/10 of a second, and even Zane only exactly a 10th behind.
Yeah, I caught the end of Kryptonite's lap actually. Sort of the last chicane. It looked pretty smooth. He had a bit of a toe, I'd say, up to the line as well, which may have just given him enough time to get up into second place. Not quite enough though to take provisional pole, 6,000ths adrift. We've got 5 minutes left to go of the session. Still 3 drivers yet to do lap times, and if you get to that point of this session where you haven't done a lap time, you're going to be getting more infuriated because you know you've got the pace, but it's just so tough to hook it up when you've got to commit as much as you have, but it's just so easy to invalidate if you go just a bit over the limits. It is one of those tracks that's great when you get it right, but infuriating when you can't.
And I just saw from Andrew what just happened to him is probably the most annoying thing about this entire track, invalidating on your outlap in the final chicane, because it doesn't only invalidate your outlap, but it also does invalidate your next lap as soon as you cross the line. So, and you are past the pit lane as well, so you can't pit, so you're basically running for nothing for an entire lap, and that is probably the most frustrating thing what can happen to you in qualifying. And that's what you definitely do not want, as Ethan has put his Williams up in that top 6 group as well in P4, even ahead of his teammate. So we've got both Williams and both the Red Bulls right now up in that top 6 group.
Yeah, it's the grid right now doesn't really bear any sort of resemblance to what we've seen in the championship standings. It's a bit bizarre. I actually forgot. I hadn't even looked at Rick yet because I was actually double checking if he was actually racing tonight, but he is, and he's currently down in 13th. So yeah, he hasn't hooked up a lap yet either. I'm following Denzo at the moment, who I think might be the only driver who's actually pushing at the moment. He is on a better lap. Currently 16th. He might go up into the top 10 with a decent last sector here. So I'm going to keep an eye on this. But this final chicane, we've seen so many different attempts at it so far. And
Oh!
he does clatter the wall of champions. He's going to improve his lap time, but not by as much as he should have done. I that looked to me weirdly. I know it's going to sounds weird because he hit the wall, but it looked to me like a bit of an unsure, nervy turn into that corner to me.
Yeah, it kind of looked like lag as well. It was just a bit of everything, to be honest. As we now head towards the end of qualifying, and Kryptonite is the first one out of that top group, who's probably going to set his final lap. But maybe that's exactly what he wants to do, because if he invalidates now on this one, he can risk everything and still has another lap that he can do. Unless he invalidates in the final chicane, because then he won't have the ERS deployment that he needs, but he invalidates earlier than the final chicane, and now he has got the time to go for another run.
Yeah, everyone sort of getting ready for their final attempts. Kryptonite's got one more attempt at it. Jabraka, a current pole sitter, he started his last attempt, and he is a temp up in the first sector, so he keeps that going, and he's going to solidify his current pole position in the Aston Martin. He's had a mixed season, to be honest. He's had a 5th place sandwiched between a DNF and a no score. So yeah, consistency not where he'd want it to be, but he could put himself right in contention here. Wow, he's lost a bit of time in that middle sector. He's 1,000th of a second quicker. First 2 bits of a lap, but you know, it doesn't sound like much, but it could be the difference between him getting pole position and not doing. You just never know. So he's got a car in front of him. It's weaving. Is that going to get?
Please. Oh, it's going to get in the way. Yes, it is, and he invalidates.
That's a bit. I don't know who that was, but that's a little bit poor.
I'm about to find out. I think it was Anryu. Yeah, it was, and that is Jabraka's going to be gutted with that one, because Kryptonite is on a lap. He's currently not improving at all, though, as Johan puts himself in P3 with the exact same lap time as Kryptonite, who was 2/10 down in the first sector, is now only down by 1/10 in the second sector on his personal best lap time, but he only needs 6,000 of an improvement, 7 actually, because he needs to be 1,000 quicker, otherwise he would stay in P2, as Max takes pole now with another really good lap from a Williams driver. What can Kryptonite do against that? It needs to be perfect here in the final sector. He goes very close to the line, but can he take pole position here in Canada? No, he can't. I think that was all thrown away in that first sector. Let's see what Alberto can do. He was slightly up on his best lap time. It doesn't look too quick, no. He wasn't on a proper lap, it looks like. Ethan is still out on his lap. I don't think that Johan is still running, because he already came across the line. But it looks like only maybe one of the Red Bulls. Yeah, Firefox still out on a lap now, entering the final chicane here, and it looked quite nice and tidy as he comes towards the line. Can he beat Max for pole position? No, he can't at all. Oh, I didn't even look at the time, sorry. That was way off. So I reckon he abandoned before that. Mali's still out on a lap, and Ethan as well. No, Mali hasn't validated.
Ethan's on a pretty good lap. He ran a bit deep into the hairpin though, and he's invalidated through the final chicane, so he won't be improving. It'd be interesting to see if his lap time was good enough. It wasn't actually, and I don't think trust Mobarak coming around the final corner. I don't think his sector times are much to shout about though. No, he goes 19th. So Max takes pole position then for the Canadian Grand Prix, and left that one right till the end. Jabraka joining me on the front row. Kryptonite, then Johan. Alberto, by the way, I did catch his final lap. He was going quicker, but he actually spun in the final, just coming into the final part of the lap, so that's why his lap time didn't go anywhere. That could have been pole for him. Really surprising qualifying there. A lot of names a bit out of position, I would say.
Yeah, obviously talking about out of position, I think the one most notable is definitely Rick, but he didn't look too quick in Zandvoort either, and suddenly, out of nowhere basically, he ended up on the podium, taking P3 with him home as soon as the rain kicked in. And it's not always about pace, but it's about consistency. But the pace is definitely there for Max, at least in qualifying, as he takes pole, but not even 200ths of a second ahead of Jabraka and Kryptonite, who was not able to improve. Johan with the exact same lap time as Kryptonite, but he only just said it right at the end. That's why he is only 4th instead of 3rd. And we've got Alberto in the Red Bull in 5th. Ethan, his teammate of Max, has to start way behind his teammate in P6, but still a pretty good result. But considering he was only 65,000ths of a second off, that's going to be disappointing to only start 6th ahead of Mali, Firefox, and Zane. And I think we're on for a good run. But I would be very happy for you to take over for a couple of seconds. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Well, we're a few minutes away from lights out. I'm just looking at the championship standings, really. Obviously, we're very early days. It's round 4, although worth bearing in mind it's an 11-race season, so we are getting close to the midpoint now. And wow, that is completely different conditions to what we saw in qualifying. And I just wonder then, we talked about drivers being out of position. Is there some drivers that put on a wet setup and sort of took the damage in qualifying and hope that it would gain them enough back in the race? It's gonna be interesting to see here. I think we're gonna see a few drivers be a lot quicker in the race than what they were in qualifying. But yeah, not just Rick, the championship leader in 11th. Black Box, his nearest challenger, it starts 15th. So that's way sort of short of where he'd want to be. Kieran, who's 3rd in the championship, he's 10th. And of course, Atez not here. So Kryptonite, who's currently rounding out the top 5 in championship, he's in the best place position, starting P3. But I think we're just about to see here how much drivers bias their setups towards wet conditions, because yeah, it was a dry qualifying and it's definitely not a dry race. So this is the worst nightmare when you make your setup. You have completely different conditions for wet weather, dry weather, and you've got to balance it out. But here we go then. The race is about to get underway.
And the lights are off now, and we are underway. It looks like a good start from Jabraka in P2, but can he challenge the Williams down into turn 1? No, he can't, but his teammate Johan is trying to overtake Kryptonite into turn 1. He's now got the inside line for turn 2 then, as we've got some contact between the Williams and the Red Bull, and it looks like the Williams has lost even more time than the Red Bull did because of that little contact, who's dropped down into 8th. That was Ethan, I think. He's still side by side with Rick, I believe, and Rick has made a solid start, is up into P9, and Ethan is trying to fight back the positions he just lost before, and is now back up to P7 as he goes past Mali, who now has to defend from the championship leader Rick. We've got people on different tyres, actually. I can see inters and I can see wets.
Yeah, this is incredible. We've got 4 drivers starting on intermediate tyres. We've got Jabraka, Kryptonite, Mali and Zane all starting on intermediates. A few of the front runners going for intermediates. It's a brave decision, but it would looking at it right now, I think the wet tyre is the one to be on, but I wonder if it's going to dry out pretty quickly. There's been contact,
and it is Zane and as I both spun around. Yeah, it's absolutely for wet conditions, because look at Jabraka, who actually seemed to got away a bit better straight off the line than Max, but then in the second phase where he needed that extra bit of traction, the Inters just didn't have it, and it looks like Max was able to already pull a gap to who is now Johan in the one Aston Martin who is on the wet tyres. His teammate Jabraka behind on Inters, same as Kryptonite. So both of them are probably thinking the long game, because it is supposed to dry up, it looks like. Fedder Speaker, in the meantime, has made a mistake and is spun round through the final chicane. We've got Black Box as well, fighting his way through turn 2. And I think he just lost the position, but he's trying to fight back now. Into turn 3 we go. It's going to be difficult to hold that outside line, and he backs out, which is probably the smartest way to go. But really good start by Rick, who's already up into P8.
Yeah, making the most. Actually got a very good launch off the line, Rick, and gained 2 places before he even got to turn 1. So great start once again, and he seems to just thrive in these wet conditions, based on Zandvoort last week and this week as well. But you can see the top 2 pulling way clear, and Jabraka and Kryptonite starting to form a bit of a train behind them. It might be Inters ready in a few laps, but how much pain are they going to take in the meantime is the question.
At the moment, it looks like it's going to be a lot of pain as there is a big dive by Kieran in the AlphaTauri, and I think he made some contact with the Williams of Ethan ahead, but I don't think that was intentional. I reckon that was just him outbraking himself. Jabraka is doing a good job of holding on to that third place right now. Kryptonite is a blessing in disguise at the moment for the man in the Aston Martin who's holding up the other drivers behind on the full wet tyres as Max just tries to pull away and sets a new fastest lap of the race. And with 3 laps done, both intermediate runners, the closest intermediate runners to the front, are already 5 seconds behind the leader. And if it should really be worth it, the rain should come within the first 10 laps. Otherwise, I think it's going to be really difficult.
I mean, from a team perspective, this is working beautifully for Aston Martin. They've got Jabraka holding up the entirety of the field pretty much, while his teammate just pulls further clear. So it's working out beautifully for Johan in that regard. And obviously with Kryptonite behind Jabraka, he hasn't got an immediate threat, which I think is what is helping these 2 intermediate runners hold up the rest of the field. You've got to look at Alberto Bear and Firefox and the Red Bulls and thinking they need to be putting a lot more pressure on these guys, and maybe this could be opportunity now as Kryptonite attacks Jabraka, in fact.
Oh, both go wide, and that could be the chance for Alberto to sneak past both of them. He got past Kryptonite in the Alfa Romeo, and he might even overtake Jabraka now as well in the Aston Martin. I think he should use his ERS, and he does so. He tries to get past that green Aston Martin car ahead. That's with the same color tires on the track right now. Rick, in the meantime, gets past Ethan, and he makes moves left, right, and center. And once again, the rain is helping the championship leaders. Kieran dropped down. I think something has happened to him. He seems to be a bit off the line and gets overtaken by Damiano as well. But once again, Rick, in the wet weather conditions, his pace is really on merit.
Yeah, he's right there, and he's making his way through the field. He's now got Firefox and Rick and Kryptonite in front of him. Alberto has cleared one of the intermediate runners and is now right behind the other. He couldn't make that move stick. That Aston Martin had some pretty good straight line speed, I have to say. But you can see it all over him in the corners and taps the back of him, in fact. Coming out of turn 5 and turn 6 and 7. That was, that was a... He probably was a bit shocked by how little grip the Aston Martin had on the intermediates. He's all over the place. Surely Alberto's got to make it through. As we've got a Williams of Ethan, I think that is, running off the track.
Yeah, and we've got yellow flags in the background as well. I think there's also Mercedes who is dropping behind, and then we've got Kieran trying to make moves into the hairpin. Once again, goes down the inside. Many overtakes happening right now. Kryptonite also lost a spot to Firefox. Now Alberto flies past Jabraka and just did what he needed to do, and look at how much time they've lost to the top 2. It's 7 seconds now in between P2 and P3, which is absolutely not what the intermediate runners needed. And it looks like Alberto's made a little mistake coming out of that final turn 14, and that is the chance for Jabraka to get back past him, because what's happening right now is really helping Jabraka, who obviously, if the rain eases off, doesn't need to pit onto a fresh set of different compound tires. Same with Kryptonite, but Kryptonite has dropped back into P8 now.
You mentioned the start Rick made. Look at Bladbox from 15th all the way up to 7th.
Oh, and there goes Firefox. He wants to get past Jabraka as quickly as possible. He's really holding up everyone right now, and there's a bit of chaos behind. Rick has now lost a little bit of time and might be overtaken by his championship rival Blackbox on the outside now on that little straight. Coming up, that would usually be a DRS zone, but it is not, because it's raining. A little tap of the side pod in between the 2 championship leaders. They're still so close. There's barely even a hair being able to fit in between those 2 cars, as Rick now has the inside line for the hairpin and probably will have his position secured against his championship rival. And that was great stuff from the both of them.
Yeah, really great driving between our 2 main championship protagonists. Both have had great starts, and Bladbox nearly saw an opportunity to get up to 6th for make it 9 positions gained off the start, but he still looks like he's in a very nice position. But I tell you what, if there's not a safety car at any point in this race, Max and Johan are going to be loving life up front, because they have pulled massive margin to the cars behind while there's fighting going on. They're looking at nearly having a pit stop in hand soon.
Yeah, they need to, as soon as it gets less and less with the rain. And I gotta say, it looks like the rain has actually eased off. Because if you go on board, you can see the puddles are a lot less visible. And it might only just be still the right decision to have started on the intermediate tyres. Because at the moment, both of the leaders would rejoin behind Jabraka and maybe even behind Kryptonite. I'm not quite sure. As Firefox now is able to go past Jabraka and pulls up right in front of him, which really confused and probably didn't help Jabraka at all. Who's probably going to lose another spot now to Rick, who's got the inside line for the hairpin. Is he actually going to go for that move? No, he isn't. He's staying behind for now. And once again, Jabraka outbreaks himself, nearly runs into Firefox. And Rick says, thank you very much. Has the better grip. And looks like, a bit of contact in between the two of them. And suddenly Black Box is past, and so is Denzo. So instead of being in P5, Rick has now dropped back to P8.
Yeah, Jabraka just, I don't know if he didn't know that Rick was there, but there was a bit of contact, and that's completely stalled Rick's momentum. You feel like it's ready for intermediates now, but I would say that the intermediate runners are not really gaining all too much. For us that started on him, I wonder if he burned out those intermediates slightly, because Jabraka still isn't looking like he's got that much pace.
Yeah, we've got people pitting now onto the Inters, so I reckon it's more or less of a crossover phase now, but probably the intermediates are not too much up to temperature just yet, just because that standing water hasn't cleared up all too much at the moment. But now I think it's still the time where it was more or less worth it, but you now got to remember, Jabraka and Kryptonite are both going to have 7 more laps done on these Inters than all the others who will pit on this lap, and maybe even the next lap.
Yeah,
as he once again goes wide. Yeah, he's still struggling. Doesn't look like the Inters are really that much quick at the moment. Or, like you mentioned, maybe they just use them too much, because Black Box is about to pass Jabraka, who once again completely outbreaks himself and doesn't lose 1, doesn't lose 2, but 3 positions in one corner, and is now only just ahead of his fellow intermediate runner Kryptonite.
Yeah, Max and Johan carry on again. I guess they feel like right now they don't really need to pit, while their pace still looks
Black
like
Box
it's
pits,
strong.
so does Denzo. Both in the pit lane. Decide to switch onto the intermediate tyres. And the gap in between Jabraka and Max in the lead is currently 18.4 seconds. Obviously, all that fighting didn't help all too much with that gap. But at the moment, I would say it would be really close in between those two. But it seems like the gap is not changing on too much, and everyone's now diving into the pits for a new set of intermediate tyres. Oh, and there goes Kryptonite. What a move down the inside. If he can make it stick, he doesn't. He locks up the inside front and goes straight into Jabraka. Lets him go past once again, which I think is the right decision. And that was very brave of Kryptonite, but it also didn't work. So maybe just a bit too impatient. He was squeezed to the outside in the right-handers just before, and it was just a bit too close on the inside. That locked up the inside front, doesn't get much room on the outside here, and then desperately tries to go past Jabraka, who once again outbreaks himself. I think Jabraka might have got some front wing damage as Max pits now. Johan stays out though.
Yeah, Johan actually gained about 6/10 on that lap on Max. I don't know if Max probably felt like the tyres were done and now was the best time to switch, but he couldn't have asked for a better first stint. It's just going to be interesting to see where he comes out. I think he's going to come out, well, thanks to Kryptonite and Jabraka's ding-dong, which I think is still carrying on. Oh no, Jabraka, yeah, they're still fighting each other. Jabraka's in front, but thanks to that ding-dong that it had, Max has rejoined in a comfortable P4, and he must be feeling the moment. He's in such a strong position, but we know how quickly things can change. And I was just about to say, Kryptonite and Jabraka might be the only 2 drivers pulling off this intermediate strategy, but I fear that clash may just have kind of put that one to rest. I think I've lost too much time now.
Yeah, I actually thought for a second I was about to witness the move of the race, but sadly it was just that slight little lock-up that he had that was enough to send his car wide and into the Aston Martin of Jabraka. And look at how easily Max flies past the Red Bull Firefox here. You know, it isn't worth fighting for at the moment. Both of them are in a different race. Effectively, Max a pit stop ahead, and look at how far he is ahead of Jabraka. That's really disappointing. But yeah, that contact easily cost them 2 or 3 seconds because both went off the track, then had to get the traction down once again, and that really cost them dearly. And Johan is still carrying on. Seems like he's not too unhappy with his tyres, or he's thinking about the wear of those intermediates, because the later he pits, the longer he can go with that interset, obviously. And he's maybe trying to extend that wet tyre stint to, in the end, switch onto only one set of intermediates instead of pitting twice.
Yeah, it's a good point, to be fair. You have got to sort of think about the longer game, and I suppose Johan is in that position where he feels like, because of the gap he built up early in the race, he can be a bit more, play a bit more safe with a strategy because he's got that margin, but you can see just how much quicker Max is now than the wet tyre runners, and I can't imagine Alberto Vere's going to have too much defence for this P2, and to be fair, if he's sensible about it, the best thing to do here is to not fight it and kind of lose as little time as you possibly can.
Yeah, purple middle sector from Max as well, and he's on a hunt, he's on a mission. Johan stays out for another lap. I mean, if that strategy goes right, he won't have to make another pit stop, but Max would. But as soon as Max gets close enough to have basically that extra pit stop eliminated, then it wasn't worth it. So I don't know how long you can take the inters as Kryptonite picks up a penalty. I'm not too sure about the wear of the intermediates, if I'm honest. And it really depends on how wet the track actually is and if the rain is going to stop at any point.
Yeah, and you can... I think the time he's losing at the moment, Johan, it may just be best to come in at the end of this lap because he's going to lose so much time. Max is probably about 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds a lap quicker. That's too much that you're losing, I think, in effect, to the net race leader at the moment. And Johan, though, he would still come out in effective P2 when you consider that the two Red Bulls have got a pit. And I've just noticed as well, obviously everyone else further down has done all their pit stops to intermediates. Black Box is in P7. Rick is joined a little bit further behind in P9, and I suppose if Jabraka and Kryptonite are on the same strategy as those behind them, they're not in that bad of a position, actually, although they're continuing to fight.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation at the moment, if I'm honest, because we've got the majority of the drivers on the inters. By the way, everyone's still in the race. I don't want to jinx anything, knock on wood, but right now, 17 out of 20 drivers are out on the inters. The other 3 are inside the top 4 on the first set of wet tyres. The only thing I can imagine they're trying to do is either go until the rain is completely gone and they can switch onto dries, or they know that the rain is going to be, getting heavier once again, so they're just trying to skip this intermediate phase. So I don't think the rain is going to stay like it is right now for the rest of the race.
No, and if we got interchangeable conditions, if the rain, like you say, is either intensifying or going away completely, drivers have very much got to try and work out what they think is the best strategy to do. And right now, we've got 20 drivers, and they've all coming up with very different ideas of how this race should be run. And like you say, from that instance, it's very intriguing. But I have to say right now, Max for me is in a very, very strong position. And I reckon in a lap or two he's going to be right behind Johan. It just depends what happens. Although doing things like that isn't going to help his case, and he'll be probably slightly annoyed about as he doesn't know the fastest lap, because it's not a mistake he needs to make, but it is Canada and we tend to see a lot of penalties around here for that.
Thing is, interesting note is that Max is using his overtake button in certain corners and has about 1/4 of ERS charge left. Johan in the lead is barely using any battery charge and has about half of his ERS deployment left, even more. And Alberto in P3 has about half of his battery left. Firefox about a quarter. Jabraka just picked up a penalty, by the way, so it's equal once again between Kryptonite and Jabraka, who have had their moment in this race already, and I think they might have another one if Kryptonite decides to go for another brave move. In the rain, obviously no DRS, and it makes overtaking a lot more difficult than it is in the dry. And he's trying to go for different lines than Jabraka here to maybe get a better exit to be close enough. Usually I would say he should get the overtake done with only 4/10 behind Jabraka, but without the help of DRS, I don't think it's going to be enough. As
Jabraka's gone off.
Oh, wow, I just cut away.
Completely missed the final chicane and handed P5 to Kryptonite on a plate. He sort of bailed out of it. I think he realised he was going to end up hitting that curb hard. And, well, you mentioned about having no DNFs. I think you may just have cursed that one.
Nah, he DNF'd manually in the pits. So
okay.
that's nothing to do with the curse. I knocked on wood. I saved it.
He might already was listening to you and wanted so badly to prove you wrong.
But it was once again typical. I just cut away in that exact moment when they entered the final chicane, because I thought I'd just had another look on Johan, who was losing more and more time, and at some point he basically has to pit. As I not far away from being lapped. Don't know what happened to his race because there was a lot of things going on, but no, Johan stays out. He stays out. He's doing his own thing. Yellow flags from full, sorry.
Yeah, and we're starting to see the drivers that switched to the intermediates midway through the opening stage of the race catch up to these guys that started on the intermediates. We've got Black Box and Denzo catching up to Kryptonite and Jabraka. So I think we're going to see some battling there pretty shortly. Max is right behind Johan for the lead as well now, and I can't imagine this will be an all too difficult overtake because he's just got so much more grip, Max, at the moment, and they're clearly running very different strategies right now.
Yeah, just look at those extreme wet tyres must be overheating so much. They must be screaming on the Aston Martin car, and as they now see the intermediates having a great time flying past them on lap 15 of this race, Jon might have to overthink his strategy. But I don't know. I don't want to judge anything before the end of the race because it might pay out at the end. And I'm not sure if Max will actually make it to the end. With already now, once he crosses the line, 7 laps done on these intermediates. Don't think he's going to have the best time, but Johan once again stays out.
Yeah, he's not perturbed by seeing someone on much better tyres than him go past. He's more than happy to run his race as he sees fit. And we'll see how that develops. Kryptonite and Firefox fighting. Firefox sticking his car in a place where it was never really going to work, I suspect. And in fact, because he fought so hard against Kryptonite, he might now find himself at the prey of Jabraka straight into turn 1 as well. He is, and yeah, he spent so hard trying to fend off Kryptonite, he kind of put himself at the mercy of the car behind.
Actually, I don't know if he was really trying to defend, but I think he just didn't have the grip in the tyres, if I'm honest. Johan, by the way, still has got a 15-second gap to P4. So I can kind of understand why he's still out on track. If he has a plan that I don't know about, I still kind of understand as Black Box now gets past Firefox now. Firefox basically a sitting duck right now.
Sneaky from Denzo to follow straight through as well. Yeah, it worked nicely. Just want to say as well, shame for Fruitful on that retirement. Of course, McLaren got a 1-2 last week. That won't happen this week. Just Black Box flying the flag for them now. But yeah, I'm very much half looking up at the sky here just to see what the rain's going to do next and how that's going to affect this race, because it's clearly a plan for these drivers, even those that are struggling.
Alberto.
Hits, yes.
Interesting is that Black Box didn't defend at all against Denzo right now. He was overtaken on the straight very comfortably. Alberto goes onto Inters. So I really reckon they stayed out just for such a long time because they wanted to make a one-stop. But I don't think Johan can catch up 6 seconds to Max because both have the same amount of pit stops left. So this is the actual gap in between them. He will gain some time now, don't get me wrong. But remember that Max will have fresher tyres once again at some point.
I was just about to say Alberto Bear is ghosted on my screen. I wonder, he's lagged out the session, he's rejoined.
No,
I don't think
AI
he wanted to
pitted.
pit, but the AI's pitted for him.
Oh yeah, because
no.
look at that, the raid has stopped completely. Oh no. Oh,
That is
that
the
must
worst
hurt.
time to lag out.
That must hurt. Oh well. Yeah, now we've had a little bit of a spoiler now because of the rain just disappearing now, as Firefox is still out. We'll stop now to P11.
You can see now why some drivers did start the race on the intermediates,
Well,
and why some on the full wets have stuck it out.
if the track actually dries up quite quickly, which it is looking like it is, then Johan would still be in P2, in a comfortable P2 with an 11-second gap at the moment. But those wets are gonna overheat massively now as Rick picks up a penalty. Yeah, he's in a comfortable P2, but I think he might have blown his chances of a possible win here tonight with that strategy. And I feel very sorry for Alberto. I can't lie. I feel so sorry for him because he had the same idea as Johan and Firefox, and now the rain has stopped, and then he lags out, and his AI decides, you know what, let's pit, go for a set of inters, and yeah, the points are not off the table, but it's going to be difficult to recover to the same position he was in before he lagged out.
Johan pits.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be dries.
I don't, like I say, the problem is on full wets on a drying track, you really will have no grip. So I think he's been almost forced into that. But Kryptonite's following. Everyone's coming in the pits. They may struggle the first lap or two because the track doesn't look completely bone dry just yet. But yeah, mediums to the end, I think, for most drivers now. It seems like a pretty obvious strategy to go for, I would say.
Yeah, I'm curious to see now. Gap to leader in between Johan. And he just comes out behind Ethan. That's not good for him. He would have needed that P5 and clean air on this lap. Gap currently 28.9. Wonder what it's going to be like as soon as Max enters the pit lane. But yeah, he's on mediums. Everyone's on mediums. And it's not going to be all too nice on this first lap, I think. Especially because that track isn't fully dried up just yet, and he's lost half a second already. More than half a second even to Max in the lead, who is now in the pit lane.
Yeah, Max will just be hoping for a really easy end to the race with no safety cars, and it's his race to lose if that happens. Black Box and Rick should be coming into the pits now. Indeed they are. We just see where the two championship contenders feed out into the pack. But they are together on the racetrack, so that should make for an interesting end to the race. And Johan should maintain his P2 now.
Yeah, he's back where he was before the pit stop.
He's the most unluckiest driver on the grid, Alberto pits.
Yeah, I feel so sorry for him. Zane puts in the fastest lap of the race on the inters, and he stayed out. He actually stayed out. Okay, interesting. DRS enabled. That's what I was actually expecting, but don't know what his plan is to stay out on the inters because they're going to be dead within the next 2 laps, and there's that big pack of cars with a couple of seconds in between each groups coming up. Johan 10 seconds behind Max in the lead, but remember, he still got that 3-second time penalty. Don't forget about that.
And look at this, Denzo's rejoined in between Black Box and Rick have rejoined sort of with Denzo in between them, just behind Kryptonite. So not ideal for Rick, really. I think that's as it was at the end. A bit wide there for Black Box, and Denzo might have an opportunity to overtake him here. This is not what Black Box wants or needs.
Both are lagging a bit for me, so that battle looks a bit sketchy right now. But I hope it's fine for the drivers out on the track. Johan puts in a new fastest lap. Obviously, he had that extra lap on those tires already. Don't know if Kryptonite is not lagging for me, I think. So I reckon that might just be a thing with the other drivers here. And I think that's going to be the only fight we'll see in the top group, unless there is a safety car in this final 15 laps, the battle for the podium. And at the moment it looks like Black Box is in a prime position here without a single penalty to his name, and all the other drivers around him with at least one.
Yeah, it's a really good opportunity here for. I forgot to say credit to Black Box in particular. Started P15, but he's not done anything too rash. He's made his way through the field, should I say, really nicely. And a podium is very much a possibility here. Of course, Kryptonite in front of him has a penalty, but even without that, I sense he's got an opportunity here to get that position on the racetrack. You really do feel that, barring the dreaded safety car, dreaded if you're one of the top two anyway, but the top two positions should be fairly settled right now. And the gap seems to have stabilised at the front as well. But there is a big fight here for P3 developing, as we've got Rick going for it on Denzo into turn one. Is he going to make it stick? They're not giving a quarter. Oh, a bit of contact there, wheel to wheel, but Denzo fends him off really well, I have to say. That was on the limit, but fair racing between the pair of them. And yeah, positions stay as they are for now.
I just want to mention, I didn't see anything from Oberok so far in this race, but turns out he went from P19 up to P9 now. So a really good race from him as well. Also Denzo, I was wondering where he started, way down, P17. So we've got a lot of drivers who've gained a lot of positions. Mali has dropped down, but I saw in the chat earlier on that he had some contact with Anryu, who is also down in P15. So that's unfortunate for him. Jabraka in the other Aston Martin lost out because of that strategy call on the intermediates at the start.
Yeah, the strategies have really played a key part here in terms of how this race has gone. And yeah, I'm still looking at Alberto down in P13 and thinking what could have been for him. He really got unlucky with the timing of that disconnection, and the AI then deciding to take matters into its own hands and pit for him. There's a good fight as well in the tail end of the points developing between Ethan, Trustmore, Jabraka and Ghost King. I don't know, I can't actually recall as to why, but Jabraka's ended up a long way behind Kryptonite, which is bizarre really, because they were right together for most of this race.
Yeah, I think it might have been due to a front wing change, because I think Jabraka actually had some wing damage, as we see a great fight in between Alberto and Kieran right now for what is P13. No points given for those positions, but they're still going for it, and they're battling quite nicely through basically the entirety of the first sector. Now it's settled down a little bit on this middle, on that back straight here, where you've got the DRS. But for the moment, they are racing quite nicely.
Yeah, Kieran, one of only 3 drivers to have picked up points at every single race so far this season. The other 2 being the Alfa Romeo pair of Kryptonite and Rick. But it's looking like that record is going to come to an end, but he's not going to give it up without a fight, and he's going to take P13 away from Alberto into the final chicane. A nice move indeed, Kieran up to P13. He's set a few fastest laps. The pace is there, but for whatever reason, his race just hasn't unfolded. Maybe a strategic error or two, but yeah, looking like his 100% points record is going to come to an end this evening.
Yeah, obviously to all the viewers watching, we're very sorry if we're missing something, and maybe your driver that you wanted to see wasn't mentioned all too often, but there's just so much going on, especially in the wet race with different strategies, that you just can't keep up with everything. And sadly we don't have a TV director which is giving us a camera, and some info on certain drivers as Kieran picks up another penalty. Might even be his third one, actually, if I'm not mistaken, or his second one. It's his fourth one, actually. Sorry. Yeah, not a great race for Kieran. And it just seems like it's just not his day, but sometimes you have that. And I'm not quite sure, but I think Kryptonite is catching up quite nicely at the moment to Johan in P2.
He is, but I think in a way that might be because he's been hurried along by Black Box, Denzo and Rick behind him, who are staying very close to his rear as Kieran has he crashed?
Yeah,
or
in the
pits.
In the pits.
Oh, in the pits. He's retired in the pits. So obviously that fourth penalty was the end point for him. He decided enough is enough, and yeah, his 100% points record sadly coming to an end this evening. Last season's F4 champion, of course. We had a great lot of fun commentating on that season. He had a good start to life in F3, but this will be his first disappointing evening of the season, I think.
Yeah, sometimes it's just not your day and just nothing is coming your way. That's just how it is sometimes. I'm pretty sure he will come back next week stronger. But today there is going to be his first DNF. And it's really impressive to see. I actually think it's impressive to not get any penalties, especially on a wet to dry race around Canada. So impressive stuff from Black Box and Johan, and also Zane, who might be down in P15, but he's not too far away. And speaking of P15, it's now become P14 actually, as he passed Anryu, who has decided to pit and might actually retire now as well. I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Zane as well, he's only 7 seconds behind.
Oh, and a spin from Kryptonite! Oh. No! He's dropped down to P7.
Oh, big mistake from Kryptonite. That pressure from Black Box and Denzo behind telling, and that's a surprising error for someone who's usually pretty solid and consistent. And of course now he's got to try and get his tyres back firing again. He's got Ethan and Jabraka all over the back of him now, so he's still not got a safe from cars right behind him.
Well, I'm not quite sure if that was maybe contact or something, but to be honest, is it really that surprising from Kryptonite, who hasn't usually for Kryptonite himself? It's pretty surprising, who is now about to be overtaken by Ethan as well, who flies past him and goes up into P7. But this season, I gotta say, I'm not too surprised. The only race I can remember where he didn't make such a mistake, as he gets overtaken now by Jabraka around the outside into turn 1. Not even contact, but really close racing. Great move from Jabraka around the outside. And that's him up into P8. The only race I can remember not seeing a big mistake from Kryptonite was Spain, where he finished down in P9. In Bahrain, made a mistake, lost the lead, and I think we have a safety car on the track. We do. And I think that is Fedder Spiegel. Yes, who has lost his front wing in the final chicane. And suddenly, this race is turned on its head. And you know what? Suddenly, Johan is effectively in the lead. And Black Box is second because of the penalties.
And
Max Pitts.
Is why.
He has the gap.
He has a gap, and he's probably thinking, if I go on to softs, I can make back that 3 seconds that I'm going to lose. I mean, if you're Johan and Black Box, Johan pits as well. I wonder if a few drivers are going to gamble staying out here.
Yeah, it's Denzo. Denzo is going to come out in P2.
Oh, Black Box has got a drive-through penalty.
Oh, no. Oh.
And Rick's got a penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Both championship leaders getting penalties.
Oh, no. What is going on now? Everything's coming down, and suddenly the entire order is switched up. We've got Ethan in P3 in his Williams. We've got Williams in P1. We've got Williams in P3. We've got Denzo out of nowhere, who had a pretty good race. He was in one of the top groups. He was fighting for a podium, but suddenly he's well inside. He's on the podium. He's in P2. And Johan is the only one without a penalty.
I tell you what, we wanted an unpredictable championship, the top 3 in a championship. It's looking likely that none of them are going to score points here. You've got And I'm not sure. I mean, it's always easy to say now, but he's obviously got the penalty and everything. Although it's worth noting, Black Box's penalty was for speeding under the safety car, not for a pit lane infringement. I'm still surprised that Black Box and particularly Johan pitted. To be honest, I thought they maybe would have stayed out because they didn't have any penalties, and they potentially could have. Even though they might have been passed by a few cars, they would have potentially got that time back anyway.
Yeah,
So,
but
I don't
now
know.
they can fight, you know? Now they have the possibility to actually defend and to attack and to try and stay with them. And I think Jabraka, I don't know how well they get along, but they played a nice team game on their opening stint. And if Jabraka is playing the team game, he lets his teammate go through straight away after the safety car comes in. They've got Zane pitting now. And just to finish my sentence, Kryptonite this season, I wasn't surprised to see him spin, if I'm honest. I don't want to judge anything unless I've seen the incident. I don't know if he spun on his own or if it was some contact. But in the first race, he got 9th. That's the only race where I haven't seen a mistake from Kryptonite. In Bahrain, he lost the back end coming out of turn 3, lost the lead, and in the end, that loss of the lead decided the race. In Zandvoort, he made a mistake. I think he went off or half spun, lost a couple of positions again. And here today as well in Canada, he spins around, loses 3 or 4 positions, and is way down the grid. Now in P12, could have been way further up and could have been well in that fight for the race lead even.
I wonder if coming into this season as well, he maybe looked at the field, looked at the tier he was in, and thought, you know, I've got a pretty good chance of contending for a championship here. And sometimes when you feel like you're in a good position to do that, you put extra pressure on yourself, and it does lead to a few more mistakes. So maybe a bit of that as well, because I did look at this field and thought that Kryptonite would be one of the standout drivers. You know, I commentated on him recently in the Crossplay Cup, and he was pretty strong in that against some drivers that were a lot quicker than him, should I say. But it was his consistency that actually put him into good positions. But it's a different pressure, I suppose, when you're racing against drivers that you know are quicker. Maybe the pressure goes off, but when you know you're in a field where you should be competitive, maybe that just puts a bit too much pressure on himself.
And now when we look at the penalties, we can see Rick has got a 5-second penalty at a Black Box is completely out of contention. He has to serve a drive-through before the end of this race. Johan in a really good position. His teammate up ahead, who might let him just go through just because he hasn't got a penalty and is on fresher tyres anyway. Ethan on old mediums in P3. Denzo on old mediums in P2. And Max with a penalty in P1. If Johan is able to get past those 2 guys in between him and Max, I'm just thinking that he will get past Jabraka without any issues. He needs to make those moves as quickly as possible. Otherwise, Max is going to be able to extend that gap, to extend it to 3 seconds, and then it's going to be really difficult to get back into those 3 seconds of Max, because he's been pretty quick, and the safety car is coming in now.
Yep, so here we go then. Max in the lead, not as comfortable margin-wise as what he was, and he has potentially got to worry about Johan with his lack of penalties, but I sense we're going to see a few more penalties as drivers try and push on this restart. We've got a lot of very fast soft runners at the back looking to make up time. A lot of guys on old mediums towards the front looking to try and hold as many positions as possible. It's all going to concertina together, and I feel like there's going to be yet more drama to come in these last 5 laps. It's currently a Williams 1-3, the Aston Martin's 4 and 5.
And he has gone very early from Max, and he hasn't pulled that gap that he probably would have wanted to pull. But in the last chicane, you can see how much more grip he's got on those fresh softs, and he's got the gap. Let's see what Johan does now. He's right behind his teammate, and he would want to get past as quickly as possible. Same with Ethan and Denzo. Ghost King picks up a penalty. He's down in P13 anyway, so he is probably out of contention for points. And there's a mistake from Jabraka, and he now needs to make that move. but it looks like his teammate isn't really helping him. He's pushing him to the outside and into turn 6, sorry, and he pushes his teammate out wide, and there's contact. Oh, that what I mentioned with them being teammates, great team play on the first set, is that completely out the window. And Jabraka has just cost his teammate maybe even a chance for a race win.
I really don't understand that from Jabraka. It just wasn't his fight to fight, and giving their teammates, they're nearly going 4 wide into the chicane.
More contact.
Inevitable contact, and Rick is right in the middle of this as his black box, right where they don't want to be. It's all getting a bit chaotic here behind the first few guys who have just absolutely shot away. Jabraka defending for his life. He must have some damage as well. Black box going for into the far chicane.
Yeah, that was absolutely inevitable. Trying to dive it down the inside into the final chicane, but you know what? I think Black Box just thought, you know what? I have nothing to lose. I still got that drive through. I'm not in contention here at all. I'm just going for it, and that's what he gets for it. I think that was just a little bit clumsy from the McLaren driver. And suddenly Rick in P6, like in Zandvoort, he comes out of nowhere. I think he has 3 seconds of time penalties. No, 8, sorry. Yeah, he got the speeding in the pit lane penalty. Yeah. And now let's look at Johan, who's not too far away from our race leader, 4.2 seconds. They're on the same tyre though, and he has 2 cars in between him and his rival Max in the lead.
This is so difficult to work out where everyone's going to end up at the end of this race. What we do know is Rick is right on the back of Jabraka, and Jabraka's become a bit of an instant magnet in his last lap or two. And this is not what Rick could want. He wants just a nice, stress-free time of things, but he's going to have to try and overtake the Aston Martin because he needs to gain as much time as he can to avert that penalty that he's got, but no way through as of yet. I think we saw earlier that Aston Martin's got really good straight line speed, so it's going to be hard for him to overtake.
He's trying, and he's gaining and gaining, and there he goes into turn 1 down the inside. He has the inside line, doesn't get given much room on the inside. Slight tap in between those two, and he nearly spins around, but he keeps the car on the track and half straight at least. And out of turn 2, he's still in P6. And I gotta say, I'm not quite sure what Jabraka's doing right now.
Yeah, defending, I think, going a bit beyond what he should be doing. We've got Mobarak and Alberto fighting both on mediums. There's a bit of a trade queue developing behind these two as well, as these two fight for their dear lives. The amount of field spread we've got, considering we were under safety car conditions 3 laps ago, is incredible. But we've got drivers that are just absolutely not wanting to give up these places to cars that are much faster than them, and it's causing absolute chaos.
There goes Damiano. It seems to be a favourable position for the AlphaTauri drivers to make moves into that hairpin of turn 12, I believe it is. And this time it hasn't worked for Damiano, but he's lost a bit more time. Rick is trying to go for a second attempt on Jabraka, and this time it works out completely fine. Right round at the outside as Jabraka breaks early, but I'm not quite sure what Jabraka is trying to do right here. That defending was a bit clumsy on the previous lap. I mean, there was definitely space to give, but there goes Damiano for another run. Firefox, sorry, as Damiano already went past, and Mobarak is dropping like a stone at the moment, but he's fighting against Firefox, who is on the same compound as him, and he's now got the inside line, and that should be enough to hold on to P9 for now. But yeah, I mean, I think Rick had all the ride to be there on the inside into turn 1, and it looks like Jabraka just gave no room on the inside.
Yep. It's looking like Max has got the win. I'd say fairly secure, but of course all it would take is one more penalty to completely change things. Johan's now right on the back of Ethan and Denzo, of course, on those much older medium tyres. So Johan will want to try and make quick work of first the Williams and then the Alpine. We're nearly on the final lap. This race has absolutely flown by. It's been drama from start to finish, and although you could argue Max has had an easy run, almost from whites to flag, it really hasn't been as easy, as straightforward as that.
Yeah, Johan might now think, you know what, I'm not going to catch Max anyway. I'm just going to sit behind here comfortably in P4 and take that P2 on penalties. But if he would have been able to get past his teammate without less problems that he actually had, then he might have been in the fight for the race win. Ethan picks up another penalty, which does not help him at all. And it looks like the chaos has settled down a little bit now. Rick, in the meantime, has been trying to build up the gap. And look at how much he's pulled to Jabraka already. Nearly 2 seconds. But we're on the final lap, and he's got 8 seconds of penalties.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out by the end of a race. Zane, who's currently P12 with no penalties, could be jumping firmly inside the points, but I have to say, through all the chaos, absolutely fair play to Max. He owned qualifying with a brilliant lap.
Oh, and there's been a huge crash from Ethan, who lost the rear end on the final lap of this race. Out of the hairpin, he spins around and into the wall he goes. He's out of the Canadian Grand Prix as Max comes across the line to win a dominant race from him ahead of Denzo, who's going to come home in P2, but it's going to be P3 on the line as Johan takes P2 with him. Rick crosses the line in P4, drops down to P7, it looks like. No, it's even P8. That 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane really sent him down quite a lot. But wow, Ethan out of the hairpin. It looked like a very late loss of traction that he had there. And he went straight into the wall. And that was quite an hefty impact if that was real life. But wow, what a race.
Yeah, just before we're going to be able to breathe at the end of a race, Ethan with a dramatic last lap crash. And he got that penalty about a minute before that, and it maybe just trying to gain time. Maybe he felt like he was under pressure, losing him 1 or 2 more places, but in the end he lost a lot more than that. And Williams' dreams of a double great point score went up in smoke there in quite a hefty shunt. But Max the winner, Johan second, and Denzo, I believe it was, Denzo in P3. They're so hard to keep up with at the end. And I tell you what, avoiding penalties worked out beautifully for Zane as well, because he took P6 in the end.
It was a great weekend for Max. I mean, his first podium of the season, his first win of the season, and then everyone who was ahead of him, all the 5 drivers ahead of him, either didn't score at all or were kryptonite and just scored 2 points. So he's gained 16 points on every single driver ahead of him, except from Rick. Sorry, Rick got some points, but he's gained a lot of points as Rick only finished P8, Kryptonite only finished P9, Black Box was out, Kieran was out, and Ates didn't turn up here tonight. So he's made a big gain in the championship, and not gonna lie, that was a great race. I really enjoyed that one, with Johan taking P2 and Denzo in P3 with a brilliant race from him. Denzo he went a bit under the radar because he wasn't involved in fights that early on so much. But he was always in that top group, always had some solid pace, and then just made the right strategy calls, which were crucial. Didn't make mistakes, and then in the end, that's what gets you a podium.
Indeed, and Jabraka took P4 in the end. You never like to call what's going to happen post-race, but I wouldn't be shocked if Jabraka ends up in the stewards in one way or another, because he did defend pretty hard, to put it as nicely as possible, in those closing stages. But like you say, there's not the best feeling ever is when you win and you see everyone in front of you in the championship barely scoring, if at all. Rick and Kryptonite might have kept up their 100% points records, but they won't. This night won't live long in the memory for either of them.
Yeah, but I tell you what, Max is going to go into that next race with a lot of confidence and with a very good run. And I guess one driver who's not going to be too confident in that next race is Kryptonite, who's usually a very strong qualifier, who would I look at as one of the favorites for the race win next week, because qualifying is so crucial. But because of that streak of mistakes he's had in the last couple of races, I think Monaco is the worst possible track to come up next. You want something like Monza that can build up your confidence, a relatively easy track where it's not too difficult to keep your car in a straight line and facing the right direction. But then it's Monaco, where it's just one little mistake and your front wing is gone and your entire race is out the window. and I don't think that helps the confidence, which is not going to be great for Kryptonite.
No, they've the one golden thing about Monaco is you need to be confident as a driver. If you don't, if you're not able to push the limits and really attack the track, you're not going to succeed at Monaco. You're going to struggle, and like you say, qualifying, there will not be a more important qualifying this season than next week, because so much of the race is decided in qualifying, because it is virtually, if not impossible, to overtake.
It is gonna be exciting in qualifying, though. I'm pretty sure, and with the unpredictability that we've had, I don't think it's gonna be boring in the race either. I sadly won't be able to join you because I won't be here next Monday, but I will be back for Great Britain. So yeah, but I gotta say I need a bit of a break now from this race. Generally, with the races we've had this season, they were very very good to watch and very entertaining to commentate over. And anything more to say, Jake?
No, just say the championship is looking very tasty indeed, and yeah, I'm excited to do Monaco next week. Hopefully, my internet holds up. Failing that, I'll hopefully be able to drag someone else with me to stream it. But yeah, just hopefully we have some form of broadcast next week. That's my main hope.
I'm pretty sure we will. So thank you all for watching. Jake, thank you very much for joining me tonight. I gotta say, I will watch the Monaco race myself next week. I will tune in to see what is going on, because you don't really want to miss this F3 division this season with the type of races we've had. So make sure to tune in next week once again at Mondays 8 p.m. UK time for another round of PSGL PlayStation F3. Also make sure to check out our sponsor GT Omega. Link is in the description, and also make sure to use the discount code PSGL for 5% discount at checkout. And yeah, until next week, goodbye and take care.